Welcome back to our second New Testament book among the other canonical witnesses. Today we will take a look at the letter of James. When I first moved from Germany to the United States and started reading the Bible in English, I was thrown off quite a bit for some time about who or what the book of James was supposed to be. It took me quite a while to make the connection that what English Bibles call James was called Jakobus in German. I know Spanish speakers have the same issue. In Spanish Bibles it is called Jacobo, and for that matter in Greek it is Jakobu, and in Hebrew it is Yaakov. I do not know why this is not translated as Jacob in English, but rather as James. In any case, today we will be talking about the book of James. I also find it interesting that Martin Luther, who lived from 1483 to 1546 and who was responsible for starting the Protestant Reformation in 1517, would have preferred that this letter were not included in the canon of the New Testament. He even called it a letter of straw, devoid of any gospel message. That's why I took you here today to find some straw, although I didn't really find any straw, so we have this brushwork here that's all this dried up stuff, right? It probably would have been easier to find some nice straw in the fall. Well, James was especially a thorn in Luther's side because Luther had put so much emphasis on Paul's teaching of being saved by grace through faith. But James' saying about faith without works is dead did not quite fit into Luther's powerful Reformation message. So now that we all saw the straw, I can walk to nicer places here in Overpeck Park. So even though Luther had that negative view on the book of James, John Calvin, another reformer, who lived from 1509 to 1564, wrote an extensive commentary on James and did not seem to have the same issues with this book as Martin Luther. While Luther became the founder of Lutheranism, which strongly emphasizes the idea of not being saved by our actions, but by our faith in God's grace, John Calvin founded Calvinism, which does emphasize more a righteous living. So then, who wrote James? There are several possibilities. The Bible Project, the videos we are always watching, pretty firmly assumes that it is James, the oldest brother of Jesus, in Matthew 13:55. James is listed as the first among Jesus' siblings there. He was the leader of the Jerusalem church, taking on the leadership after Jesus' death. However, James died also in the year 44 CE, only 11 years after Jesus. If this letter had truly been written by Jesus' brother, then this would be the earliest Christian writing in the New Testament. It would have been written before 44 CE. That seems to be a bit of a stretch. It may also be unlikely that Jesus' brother would have had such good Hellenistic or Greek education that he could have written this letter, which features an excellent use of Greek language and deep knowledge of Greek literary and philosophical tenets. If it was not written by James, the brother of Jesus, it might have been another James, a little later in the early church. There are many biblical references to another James among the first generation Christians. In Matthew 10:3, in Mark 15:40, in Luke 6:15 through 16, in Acts 1:13. However, this solution may not satisfy some of the earlier objections. It is questionable if the other James would have had such better knowledge of Greek and the Greek culture, as he too is from the same milieu as Jesus' brother. The timing could work out better, as the other James presumably lived together lived longer than 44 CE and thus could have written later. Some scholars believe that the author wrote pseudonymously at a much later time, after Paul's whole body of work had already been written. In this case, the author would have been writing in the name of James, the brother of Jesus, since this would give strong weight to his writing. The later dating could also account for the fact that the Epistle of James was included very late into the canon of the New Testament writings. It did not appear in the earlier stages of canonization. Only in later versions of the New Testament canon does the Epistle of James appear. This would also explain the letter's apparent contradiction with Paul's theology that one is saved by grace through faith and not by works, in Romans 3:21-26 and Galatians 2:15-21, when James proclaims that faith without works is dead, in James 2:14-26. This doesn't have to be a contradiction. It could be that Paul's theology was being misunderstood, that people started saying that if they are saved by grace through faith, they could just now do anything they want. James then counters that attitude by saying, wait a moment, I don't buy that you really have faith if you don't show this in your daily life. So, when then was James written? Well, that depends on who you think the author was. If one assumes that the author was the brother of Jesus, then it would be the earliest New Testament writing. It would have had to be written before 44 CE. But why then would it not show up in the developing New Testament canon earlier? If we presume this to be written by another first generation James, it might have been written sometime in the 60s CE. If we presume this to be a pseudonymous author, then we would date it more around 95 CE, which would explain the late inclusion into the New Testament canon. So who then was the audience? The content seems to be entirely addressed to Jewish Christians. It also seems that James is addressing Christians internally, as opposed to trying to reach new converts, whose actions and behavior he addresses. That's why he can say, faith without works is dead. You wouldn't say that to potential converts. New converts would need to hear an inviting message, such as Paul had with saying that people are saved by grace through faith. The audience are also people who are familiar with the Old Testament. Hence, the thought that the audience comes from Jewish background. What is James's kerygma? Your faith will prove itself by the way you act in the world. James begins this letter with a chapter of various wisdom sayings that anticipate a series of 12 short teachings, which are only loosely connected. It is an exhortation to the Christian community to live a life that witnesses to their faith. And now you can watch the Bible Project videos on James. See you next time. Then we will talk about 1st and 2nd Peter and about Jude. See you later. Bye-bye.